Ladies and gentlemen, respected audience, and thoughtful observers of global affairs, good day. We live in an era where politics is no longer local, where economics is no longer national, and where diplomacy is no longer confined to closed rooms. Today, every policy move, every handshake, every diplomatic negotiation is instantly observed, analyzed, and debated not only by political analysts, but by common citizens around the world. It is against this backdrop that we turn our attention to the story at hand. All eyes on geopolitical negotiations underway. Reported by Deccan Herald. This phrase is not just a headline, it is a reflection of our times. The entire world, from policymakers in Washington and Brussels to traders in Mumbai and Shanghai, is watching the delicate dance of negotiations unfolding across Asia, Europe, and beyond. India, as a rising power, stands right at the center of this shifting global order. Today, I will explore this issue in depth, breaking it down into clear sections. We will look at the background of current negotiations, the role of India, the dynamics with China, Russia, and the US, the stakes for global trade and security, and what it all means for ordinary citizens. By the end, you will see why these negotiations are being closely watched, why the outcomes could reshape our world, and how India must navigate this delicate balance. To understand why all eyes are on these talks, we must first understand the global context. The international system today is not the same as it was even 5 years ago. The post-Cold War unipolar world dominated by the United States has shifted into a multipolar one. China has risen as an economic and military giant. Russia has reasserted itself aggressively in Ukraine and elsewhere. And regional powers like India, Brazil, and Turkey are demanding more voice in global governance. This shifting balance of power means negotiations are no longer straightforward. They are layered with strategic competition, economic rivalry, and ideological differences. On one hand, countries depend on each other for trade, technology, and energy. On the other hand, they compete fiercely for influence, resources, and alliances. In this context, India is a pivotal player. With its 1.4 billion people, one of the world's fastest-growing economies, and a strategic location in the Indo-Pacific, India cannot be ignored. Every major power, be it the United States, Russia, or China, wants India on its side. That is why these negotiations are so closely watched. India finds itself in a delicate position, shares deep defense ties with Russia. It is an important trade partner for the United States, and it has a complicated and often tense relationship with China. At the same time, India is also leading the global South, projecting itself as a voice for developing nations in forums like the G20 and BRICS. So, when India sits at the negotiation table, the outcome doesn't just affect it affects the global balance. One of the most closely watched aspects of current negotiations is India's relationship with China. The two nations share a long border, a history of conflict, and a present full of tension, from military standoffs in Ladakh to rivalry in the Indo-Pacific. Yet, they are also massive trading partners, with bilateral trade crossing $120 billion in recent years. So, when India and China engage in talks, whether on security, trade, or regional stability, the world watches carefully. Will these talks reduce border tensions? Will they bring greater economic cooperation? Or will they further deepen the mistrust that exists? Next, let's turn to Russia. For decades, Russia has been India's most important defense partner. Even today, around 60 to 70% of India's military equipment comes from Russia. But the war in Ukraine and Western sanctions have complicated this relationship. When Indian and Russian officials meet in the current negotiations, the stakes are high. India wants to maintain its defense supplies, secure cheap oil, and preserve an old friendship. At the same time, India cannot afford to alienate the United States and Europe, who are critical for trade, technology, and investment. This is why these negotiations are so delicate. India must carefully balance its ties between Russia and the West. Of course, we cannot talk about negotiations without mentioning the United States. As the world's largest economy and military superpower, the U.S. has enormous influence. In recent years, Washington has courted India as a key partner in the Indo-Pacific strategy to counter China's rise. Defense pacts, technology transfers, and trade deals have all been part of this courtship. But tensions remain. Tariffs, visa restrictions, and differences over Russia and climate policies often put strain on the relationship. In the current round of negotiations, observers are asking, will India and the U.S. find greater alignment? Or will differences once again hold them back? Geopolitical negotiations are not just about politics. They are about economics, too. Global supply chains, energy security, and technological cooperation all hang in the balance. For India, securing favorable trade deals, attracting foreign investment, and ensuring energy stability are critical for sustaining its growth trajectory. For the rest of the world, India's choices matter as well. If India deepens trade with the U.S., it could reduce China's dominance in Asia. If it strengthens ties with Russia, it could reshape global energy markets. Every outcome has ripple effects. Another crucial dimension is security. The Indo-Pacific has become the world's geopolitical hotspot. From the South China Sea to the Strait of Malacca, tensions are rising. Freedom of navigation, military alliances, and territorial disputes all make this region volatile. India's role in Quad alongside the US, Japan, and Australia has added another layer to negotiations. Will India take a stronger stance against China, or will it continue to balance caution with cooperation? These are the questions shaping the security dimension of current talks. Beyond great power politics, India is also positioning itself as a leader of the global South. Through forums like BRICS, G20, and SCO, India is championing the concerns of developing nations on debt relief, climate change, and fair trade. The world is watching to see if India can truly become a bridge between developed and developing countries, and whether these negotiations will enhance its credibility as a global leader. Now we come to the most important question. Why is the world so focused on these negotiations? The answer is simple: because the outcomes will shape the future. If these talks succeed, they could bring stability, economic growth, and cooperation. If they fail, the risk of conflict, trade wars, and instability grows. We live in a globalized world where no country is isolated. Decisions made in Delhi, Washington, Beijing, or Moscow have consequences for farmers in Punjab, tech workers in Bangalore, factory owners in Detroit, and traders in Shanghai. That is why all eyes are on these negotiations. Ladies and gentlemen, we are at a turning point in history. The negotiations underway are not just about agreements or treaties, they are about defining the new world order. India's role is central, delicate, and decisive. The choices India makes, whether in balancing ties with Russia and the US, in managing tensions with China, or in leading the global South, will affect not only its own future, but also the future of the world. In the days to come, as these talks unfold, the world will continue to watch closely. Because in geopolitics, as in life, negotiations are not just about words. They are about power, trust, vision, and destiny. Thank you.